A 17-year-old intern for Representative Ilhan Omar's opponent was recently murdered in street violence. Instances of violence like this have plagued Omar's district. But instead of wanting to make her community safer, she wants the police to be completely dismantled. Take a look.
I will never co-sign on funding a police department that continues to brutalize us. And I will never stop saying, not only do we need to disinvest in police, but we need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department.
Omar has been one of the most vocal voices in the left's war on police. They've used events like the death of George Floyd to systematically dismantle law enforcement and hide behind the rhetoric of the BLM movement in order to do so. But the leaders of BLM are trained Marxists by their own admission. So it's no wonder why they would want to destroy our system of government. The sad irony is, the people hurt the most by BLM's war on police are often Black Americans who live in dangerous communities where protection from the police is the most necessary. So with me now is Senior Legal Fellow and Manager at the National Security Law Program, Cully Stimson. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you make of this tragic situation? Because here you have an intern for a Republican congressional candidate being killed by the very same street violence that Lacey Johnson is trying to address.
Well, the young Mr. Conley is no longer with us, and he's no longer with us. We don't know why, but we know somebody shot him and a colleague of his. But this movement to defund the police is just wacky, and the only thing more disturbing than the representative's call for it are the people who cheered her calls for it, which are a small segment of society, but it's growing. Compounded with that is this rogue prosecutor movement funded by George Soros to elect essentially pro-defendant prosecutors who want to end so-called mass incarceration. Their movement is focused on pro-criminal actions. They're not focused on the safety of the citizens, and clearly the representative and those who support this wacky idea aren't representative of the people who want safe communities, which, as you said in the lead-up, are Black and brown and underserved minorities in poorer districts, including poor white people. And so this is a sort of Alice in Wonderland upside down version of why people come to this country, for law and order and the rule of law.
And on Wednesday, we saw some of the city council members at Minneapolis. They were having a meeting. And what was interesting to me is that the president of the city council, she was going after police, accusing them of ignoring the violence in the streets. And yet this was the same woman, if you remember from CNN a few months ago, she was saying that if you feel afraid in your house because of a lack of police, that that's really your white privilege speaking to you, and that you don't deserve safety, and that basically, give up the police and stuff, and that's the only way you can be an anti-racist. And yet here we are, fast forward a few months later, and now she's looking at the police saying, where are you guys? The violence is skyrocketing.
Yeah, the hypocrisy is almost laughable if the topic wasn't so serious. The fact is that you're not going to have social workers who do important jobs or other people who aren't trained law enforcement officers helping to fight crime and arresting people and investigating crimes. We have over 18,000 different police departments across the United States, from very large ones like New York City to very small ones. And they are well trained. There's some errant officers, a small, tiny handful, just like there are errant journalists and errant doctors and errant lawyers. And we have systems in place to hold people accountable who commit crimes. But the people like this city council person who has these wacky ideas are going to find that residents, businesses, and others who want to reside peacefully in their districts are going to leave. And that's exactly what's happening.
That is, and also interesting you bring that up because there was also reports today about residents, I should say, in Minneapolis, and they're speaking out saying that they feel like they're living in a war zone right now. So do you think come November, when the election hits, do you think that this will cause a red wave, if you will, a lot of Democrat voters, people who voted Democrat their whole life, maybe starting to see and feel what it's like to live under such oppressive one-party rule in these blue cities and states, and finally saying, enough of this. We need someone who's going to defend our businesses, defend our schools, defend our streets, keep us safe, defend our officers. Do you expect any of that to happen?
I'm not a political prognosticator, so you got to ask Charlie Cook or one of those other folks who are experts in that. But my sense is that in these national elections, pocketbook issues and safety matter to the moms and dads out there. So if they think for some reason that the Democratic Party and the head of their ticket is in some way responsible or not doing enough, they might turn the other way. The hatred of Trump is real. There's not a lot of support for Biden. The enthusiasm gap, as I understand it, is real. But they may try to hold their local politicians more accountable than the top of the ticket. But I'm not an expert in that area, so I really can't say.
Yeah, and so as far as we know, that the teen himself, we know that he was a paid intern for Lacey Johnson's campaign, but we don't know why or who shot him or who killed him. But we do know in the neighboring state, in Wisconsin, we had Milwaukee a few months ago. There was a six-year-old man who was murdered in a drive-by shooting, and he was with his Trump campaign signs. He had them around himself. Do you think that there is a double standard in how violence against Republican supporters, how that's being played up, or not talked about, I should say, by the media?
Well, look, I think it would be imprudent of us, and I say this as a former prosecutor at the local, state, and federal level, and defense attorney, to make any guesses as to motive or why somebody killed Mr. Conley. But of course, when you saw that Steve Scalise and the Republicans were shot at during the congressional baseball game, and you didn't see the outrage that one would expect or certainly know would happen if that happened at the Democratic baseball game practice, I think there is a double standard here to some degree. But there's no evidence that we know of right now that ties any political connection to this random act of murder and violence. And I hope they get to the bottom of it, and I hope they hold the person accountable for the murder and punish him and sentence him or her accordingly.
Thank you so much for your analysis tonight, Cully.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.